Biden and the people surrounding him in his cabinet have Ukraine on the brain since at least Obama's second term. They're obsessed with Ukraine. I think Ukraine is a giant cash cow for those who are corrupt. Back in 2014, Ukraine was in need of some good old-fashioned United States savings, and Ukrainians were rebelling against the Russian-aligned government, all on their own. But Obama and Biden were experiencing a major case of fear of missing out, so they just had to get involved, and so we did. And it drew everyone in the U.S. State Department, national security apparatus, and even George Soros to Ukraine. You see, back then, Ukraine was considered corrupt. Their leaders corrupt. The oligarchs corrupt. Ultra, mega corrupt. So naturally, Joe Biden's son jumps right into bed with them, and the media and the political elite find no issues with this whatsoever. Sure, it's a corrupt country. I mean, Obama and Biden's stated goal was to root that corruption out between the government and the oligarchs. But the vice president's son going to work for Burisma was just fine. Nothing to see here. For over a decade, the story from Western governments has been that Ukraine is a corrupt government and we can save them. But up until February 2022, it hadn't been resolved yet. Now, speaking about not being resolved, did we ever hear about the $1.8 billion that went missing in the bowels of Privat Bank? That was our money, by the way, our tax dollars. Did anybody in the mainstream media nail that down? Did Congress? I ask this question because Congress has now greenlit $54 billion in taxpayer funding to Ukraine to fight off the Russians. And then, $8 billion already was sent. And then on Friday, they announced another $270 million. Let's just put it into perspective. That's a lot of money. Where's it all going? Why are we writing them a blank check? Can we at least get a final verdict on whether the Ukrainian government is corrupt? I think I speak for the majority of the country when I say the Biden administration's signals are a little mixed up here. We're a bit confused. Wasn't corruption the main focus of our help back in 2014? Isn't that why George Soros swooped in? And now everything's okay? They couldn't keep track of $1.8 billion, and we give them $60 billion? Let me ask you this. I find it interesting that President Zelenksyy recently revoked the citizenship of the Ukrainian oligarch Kolomoisky. When Biden was VP, Kolomoisky was the principal holder of both Burisma, which his son worked for, and Privat Bank, the one that lost the $1.8 billion. Now, he had previously been on a U.S. visa ban over his involvement with hired thugs that actually used chainsaws to behead people. But Biden made sure that he had his visa ban lifted so he could come to the United States. And it gets more interesting, as that this is the time that both Biden and John Kerry were lobbying for $1.8 billion aid package to Ukraine. That aid money went to Kolomoisky's Privat Bank and then disappeared. Allegedly, it was channeled in a money laundering scheme through a bank in Cyprus and then went to various shell companies. Now, he's also the governor of eastern Ukraine, funding a near-private war between Ukrainian militias and Russia's. Now, whether he's doing that with his money or someone else's is unknown. Oh, by the way, Kolomoisky is his money is the big reason why Zelensky got elected. But now that Biden is in office, Zelensky has revoked the citizenship of his previous friend. Is there any chance that we'll find out later that Joe Biden lobbied for this to happen? If anyone has the receipts on Burisma, Privat Bank, the missing $1.8 billion, and what's going on with this private war between Ukraine and Russia, Kolomoisky would have them. And it's really weird that now his citizenship of Ukraine has been revoked. We want to talk to Congresswoman Victoria Spartz. She's from Indiana. Hello, Congresswoman. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Now, you're from Ukraine. You became a citizen in the year 2000, and you're concerned about the money we're sending over there.
Well, let me tell you, and I appreciate actually became citizen in 2006. It took me 6 years because it's not that fast when you come here legally. So I came in 2000, so it takes you a while to become a citizen. But let me tell you, and I might have a little bit different perspective, that I want to separate Ukrainian government from Ukrainian people and actually army and fighters that dying in the trenches. You know, they've been trying to restore freedoms in that country and fought two revolutions, and they fight in these wars that really want to have freedom. So when I go there and talk to the people, when I talk to these young boys dying on the front lines, you know, it breaks my heart to see how we are mismanaging the situation and allow them to die without proper oversight of the government. Because I think it's important in a country like that to hold government accountable. And I think, you know, we have to differentiate that. You know, I always say, you know, we have, you know, very great people, Americans, but our government leaves much to be desired. So it's not always representation, unfortunately, of the people. But I think for me to see that, and actually, you know, and what Biden is doing, it seems to me, and actually most of the money you mentioned don't go directly to Ukraine because there are a lot of things around that. But how he's really stolen the help, how he's not overseeing it, it's actually he's mismanaging Ukraine, and it's almost either his incompetency or on purpose to allow Russia to advance much more significantly. You know, and what really was concerning for me when I went to Ukraine to see, you know, how much power now people around Zelensky were able to consolidate this power grab. You know, and we're talking about Kolomoisky and these oligarchs, but if you know the part of that, you know, they actually took citizen. There was no due process or executive order at stolen the border. Someone who is actually in charge of territorial defense of a major city, Dnipro, you know, right in eastern Ukraine, and that person had nothing to do. He was just lucky enough to meet for half an hour with me. They almost detained parliamentarians from Ukrainian parliament who tried to leave the country to come to U.S. because they worried he's going to meet with U.S. legislator. So this amount of power and abuse of power and concentration is very dangerous for the country. In country which doesn't have check and balances, where judicial prosecutorial branch is controlled by president and people around him, a lot of Russian infiltration, a lot of different problems. So I think this is a valid concern. And unfortunately that they are now started a witch hunt against some Ukrainians that had nothing to do, you know, with anything, because the issues I was bringing up, they actually were brought up by our military people during my cadets, and they were brought up by some U.S. companies, you know, doing business in Europe and actually doing business in defense industry. And they had some concern, and it's interesting, you know, because there is some issues that I didn't want to bring up because, you know, I know that it was reported to FBI, but it was brought up recently, you know, in Ukrainian newspapers, where this guy Yermak that I mentioned, his father, you know, an appointee of Yermak in Minister of Defense, you know, creating monopoly, had cooperation with Iran and Afghanistan, you know, and sabotaging some of the purchasing of weapons, and have a very interesting connection to Russia and Putin. So I think it's very dangerous for us not to deal with properly managed situation, because if we turn Ukraine another Afghanistan, it's very dangerous for our national security too, because Ukraine has a lot of critical resources. It's not a small country, and having Wild West there could be dangerous for all of us, and it's been escalating, and it's been managed by this administration.
All right. So, Congresswoman, I'm not sure if we're on the same page. I really like the people of Ukraine. I have a soft spot for what they've done in the past on fighting Russia. I feel horrible about the people who have lost their lives, and the women and children. And, you know, we have a team over there that is rescuing children and trying to get them safe to safety and not be trafficked. But I just think this is a convenient little war. Why, for instance, did Zelensky get rid of Kolomoisky? Why did he revoke his citizenship? I mean, it just seems convenient if you were looking to make sure that nobody was around to tell about the dirty things you were doing. Why is it that President Zelenksyy was against gay marriage, because it's a different country with different standards. He was against it, and yet during the war now, they pass a law for gay marriage. And that seems to me like American pressure being exerted at the worst possible time because we gave him money.
Well, no doubt, but I wish American pressure would be exerted in the ways how they can improve their logistics, how they can improve oversight and make sure that they can be more accountable to American people instead of playing politics and playing an agenda that is unfortunately, been very radical in this country. And I think they're playing politics instead of managing the processes and governing, because governments like Ukraine or governments like Afghanistan, they have to be forced to provide transparency to our people. If you don't, you will have another Afghanistan. But unfortunately, they haven't been doing that, but doing other things that are very not productive for them to fight and win that war. And I think this is our responsibility of Congress to put pressure, just because this is going to be a major problem for us if we don't de-escalate situation, but also we have accountability to our people and to Ukrainian people. They're dying there.
Is Zelensky a good guy or a bad guy?
Well,
or is the answer to that yes?
Yeah, I think we have to, they have to, I don't look at people good or bad. I actually have a very low regards for all politicians in general. So it's not about that. Every president should have accountability. Every president has to be watched. But the amount of power right now Ukrainian government is accumulating, and a power grab and abuse of power, where they actually decide who can enter the border, who can exit with proper due process, and using the war to consolidate media and control prosecutorial judicial branch, it's very dangerous. And he needs to be responsible that he put people, and his chief of staff is becoming a dictator in that country. So President Zelenskyy needs to take responsibility and explain what's happening there. I know that he's busy doing a lot of external things and dealing with leaders in Europe and here, but he's still a president, and he needs to be responsible and tell us what's happening, why this amount of abuse of power. That's not what Ukrainian people are fighting for, to have another dictator. That's what they want, and I think that's very not productive.
I really appreciate it. This is Congresswoman Victoria Spartz. And she has been very outspoken, and because of it, she's gotten heat from the left and the right. But intellectual debate is necessary to be able to be a free country. And I appreciate you speaking out, Victoria. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's never easy to do the right thing, but it's worth it. Thank you so much.
Yes, it is. Thank you. God bless you.